The rain hammered the awning of the corner coffee shop like it had a personal grudge against Seattle's endless gray skies, and I was one dead phone battery away from missing my shift at the bookstore. Desperation clawed at me as I scanned the room, eyes landing on the only free outlet tucked under a wobbly table in the back, guarded by a guy who looked like he'd stepped out of a brooding indie film poster. He caught my stare, those piercing green eyes narrowing just a fraction, and before I could chicken out, I blurted, "Hey, mind if I plug in for like 5 minutes? My life's hanging by a thread here." His lips twitched into something that wasn't quite a smile, but close enough to make my stomach flip, until he slid his chair back, revealing not just the outlet, but a sketchbook splayed open to a half-finished portrait of a man who looked eerily like me, if I'd ever had the guts to stare at my own reflection that long. Liam Harper, 24 and perpetually one bad decision from rock bottom, had no idea that borrowing Carter Voss's outlet would unravel the fragile threads of my carefully curated solitude. It was supposed to be a nothing moment in a city that chewed up dreamers like me and spat them out into the Puget Sound. I'd moved to Seattle 2 years ago, chasing the ghost of a film school acceptance letter that never came, crashing on friends' couches until I landed the gig-slinging dog-eared paperbacks to hipsters who pretended to care about Kerouac. My days blurred into nights of instant ramen and rejection emails, my queerness a quiet undercurrent I kept buried under flannel shirts and forced smiles at family Zoom calls back in Ohio. Coming out at 18 had been a quiet detonation. Mom's tears, Dad's silence, my little sister's awkward hugs, but I'd patched it over with the kind of optimism that comes from knowing you can't go home again. Carter, though. God. Carter was a storm wrapped in faded band tees and that perpetual 5 o'clock shadow that screamed, "I don't give a fuck," while his eyes begged someone to prove him wrong. He was 26, a freelance graphic designer who'd washed up in the Emerald City after a messy breakup in Portland, or so he'd tell me later over stolen sips of his black coffee. That first afternoon, as my phone slurped greedily at the outlet, he didn't say much. Just pushed the sketchbook aside with a casual flick, like it was no big deal that he'd been drawing a stranger's face from across the room. "You look like you could use it more than I do," he muttered, voice low and gravelly, laced with that Pacific Northwest drawl that made everything sound like a secret. I laughed, too loud, fumbling for my charger like an idiot, and that's when it happened. My elbow knocked his mug, sending a splash of coffee arcing across the table, right onto the edge of his sketch. "Shit. Oh God. I'm so sorry," I stammered, grabbing napkins like they were a lifeline, dabbing at the stain while my cheeks burned hotter than the brew. He just watched me, that half-smile deepening into something sharper, more alive, and before I could bolt, his hand covered mine, steady, warm, calloused from pencils and pixels. Time stuttered. The rain outside softened to a patter, the chatter of the shop fading to white noise. "It's fine," he said, not pulling away. "Accidents happen. Makes for a better story." And just like that, with coffee dripping between us like some shitty rom-com metaphor, I felt the pull, a magnetic yank toward the chaos he embodied, the kind I'd spent years running from. We talked for an hour after that, the outlet forgotten as my phone charged to life beside us. He asked about the bookstore, genuinely curious about the weirdos who came in hunting first editions of Ginsberg, and I spilled about my half-assed screenplay dreams, the one where a lost kid finds his way through rainy streets and stolen glances. Carter leaned in, elbows on the table, and shared fragments of his own wreckage. An ex who bailed when the freelance gigs dried up, leaving him with a sublet in Capitol Hill and a habit of sketching strangers to remind himself he was still breathing. People are puzzles, he said, tracing the rim of his mug with a thumb. You think you've got the pieces, then bam, one edge doesn't fit. His gaze held mine, unflinching, and I swear the air thickened, charged like the storm outside was seeping through the cracks. By closing time, the barista was shooting us dirty looks, and Carter stood first, slinging his messenger bag over one shoulder. Walk with me. It wasn't a question, more an invitation wrapped in inevitability. The rain had eased to a mist, Seattle's streets gleaming under sodium lamps as we wandered toward Pike Place, dodging tourists and the faint brine of the market. He bought us churros from a street vendor, greasy, cinnamon-dusted perfection, and we ate them leaning against a brick wall, shoulders brushing in that electric, not-quite-accidental way. "Your trouble, Liam Harper," he said around a mouthful, green eyes sparkling with mischief. I wanted to deny it, but the words stuck, because maybe he was right. Maybe I'd been waiting for trouble to find me, disguised as a borrowed outlet and a spilled coffee. That night, I crashed on my futon in a Belltown studio that smelled like damp socks and regret, replaying the evening on loop. My phone buzzed at midnight, a text from an unknown number. Sketch the sequel tomorrow? Same spot. See my heart jackhammered. I typed back only if you promise no more coffee casualties, and hit send before sanity could intervene. Sleep came in fits, dreams tangled with rain-slick sketches and the ghost of his hand on mine. Little did I know, that sequel would drag me into a whirlwind of late-night confessions and rooftop stargazing, where every laugh felt like foreplay and every silence hummed with unspoken want. But accidents, as Carter would say, make the best stories, and ours was just revving up, engine roaring toward a cliff I couldn't yet see. The second time we met at the coffee shop, the sun cracked through the clouds like a reluctant apology, painting the worn wooden tables in golden streaks that made everything feel possible. I arrived early, nerves jangling like loose change in my pocket, nursing a latte that tasted like burnt promises. Carter strolled in 5 minutes late, hair tousled from the wind off the sound, carrying a takeout bag from the market, fresh halibut sandwiches wrapped in wax paper, because apparently he was the type who remembered you hated tuna from a throwaway comment the day before. Fuel for the muse, he grinned, sliding into the seat across from me, and just like that, the awkwardness evaporated, replaced by this easy rhythm, like we'd been trading sketches and secrets for years. Over the next week, our accidental hangouts became a ritual. Mornings bleeding into afternoons at that same corner table, evenings spilling into walks along the waterfront where ferries cut wakes like silver scars on the water. He'd show me his latest designs, bold, jagged graphics for indie bands that screamed rebellion, and I'd read him snippets of my screenplay, voice cracking on the vulnerable bits where the protagonist admitted he was scared of being seen. Carter listened like it was gospel, head tilted, fingers drumming a silent beat on his knee. "That's raw, man," he'd say, and the praise landed like sunlight on frostbitten skin, thawing parts of me I'd forgotten were frozen. One night, after a showing of some obscure queer cinema at the Egyptian Theater, grainy black and white frames of forbidden touches in shadowed alleys, we ended up on his fire escape, a rickety metal perch overlooking the hum of Capitol Hill. The city sprawled below us, a mosaic of twinkling lights and distant sirens, the air thick with the scent of rain-soaked evergreens and distant weed smoke. He passed me a joint, our fingers brushing in that now familiar spark, and as the haze settled, he turned to me, silhouette sharp against the neon glow. "You know, I drew you because you looked unbroken." like you carry the weight but don't let it crush you. His voice was soft, stripped bare, and I felt exposed, seen in a way that terrified and thrilled me. I took a drag, coughing lightly, and handed it back. Unbroken? That's a nice lie. I'm just good at duct tape. We laughed, but it faded into quiet, the kind that invites truths. I told him about Ohio, the stifling summers, the church youth group where I learned to pray away the dreams of boys' hands on my skin. Coming out had been like ripping off a scab too soon. Bloody, messy, with my parents' disappointment echoing like thunder. They love me, I think, I said, staring at the stars peeking through the city smog. But it's conditional. Like, we love you, but not that part of you. Carter nodded, shadows playing across his face, and for the first time, he shared his own fracture. A conservative family in rural Oregon. A brother who disowned him after catching him kissing a farmhand at 17. I ran to Portland thinking distance would fix it. Then to hear. But the ghosts hitchhike. In that vulnerability, the air shifted, charged, expectant. He leaned closer, the joint forgotten on the railing, and cupped my face with one hand, thumb tracing my jaw like he was memorizing the lines for a sketch. My breath hitched. Liam, he whispered. Name a question and a plea, and then his lips were on mine, soft at first, tentative, tasting of smoke and salt and something sweeter, like redemption. I melted into it, hands fisting his shirt, pulling him closer as the kiss deepened. Hungry and unhurried, the world narrowing to the press of his body against mine. The faint scrape of stubble, the way he sighed into my mouth like I'd unlocked a door he'd boarded up years ago. We broke apart gasping, foreheads pressed together, laughter bubbling up through the haze. Accidental, I murmured, echoing our origin story, and he chuckled, low and warm. Best mistake I never saw coming. That night, we didn't go further, just tangled limbs on his thrift store couch, watching old episodes of the L Word until dawn crept in, his head on my chest, my fingers carding through his hair. Felt like home, the kind I'd never known. Safe, electric, alive with possibility. But Seattle has a way of whispering warnings in the wind, and as our accidental boyfriend phase solidified stolen weekends hiking the Olympics, lazy Sundays cooking pasta in his tiny kitchen with wine-stained lips and flour-dusted counters, I started noticing the cracks. Texts he'd silence mid-convo, a photo on his fridge of him with a guy who looked too familiar, arm slung possessively around Carter's waist. Push it down. Chalk it up to paranoia born of too many rom-coms where the meet-cute hides a grenade. After all, wasn't this what I'd craved? A love that felt like falling upward, toward light instead of the abyss? Yet, as the leaves turned fiery in Discovery Park, and our bodies learned each other's rhythms in the quiet hours, slow explorations under threadbare sheets, whispers of stay against sweat-slick skin, I couldn't shake the feeling that our story was borrowing time from a debt we hadn't paid. Carter's sketches of me evolved, from stranger's glance to lover's gaze, but in the margins, faint lines hinted at shadows I wasn't ready to name. And then, one crisp October evening, as we queued for tickets to a drag brunch in the U District, his hand warm in mine, promising forever in the squeeze, the universe decided to collect. The drag brunch was a riot of sequins and shade, queens lip-syncing to Gaga under balloon arches while mimosas flowed like confessions at last call. Carter and I claimed a corner booth, knees knocking under the table, his foot hooked playfully around my ankle as we toasted to us. This improbable, intoxicating thing we'd stumbled into. The performer on stage, a statuesque diva in fishnets and a feather boa, belted out Bad Romance with a wink our way, and Carter pulled me in for a kiss that tasted like orange juice and possibility, right there in the glitter-dusted chaos. It was perfect, the kind of moment you'd frame and hang on the wall of your heart. But perfection in Seattle? That's just the calm before the squall. We were halfway through our second round when his phone buzzed, insistent, vibrating against the tabletop like a trapped hornet. He glanced at it, face tightening for a split second before he flipped it over, screen down. "Work," he muttered, but his laugh came too quick, too forced. I nodded, sipping my drink to drown the unease, but the seed was planted, sprouting thorns in the fertile soil of my insecurities. Later, as we wandered the bustling streets of the U District, past street musicians strumming covers of Elliott Smith, the air crisp with fallen leaves and espresso, we passed a vintage bookstore, its window display crammed with queer-lit classics. Giovanni's room stared out at us, Baldwin's words a silent siren, and Carter paused, hand lingering on mine. "Read that one?" he asked, voice soft. "Twice," I admitted. "Hits different when you're living it." We bought dog-eared copies on impulse, retreating to his place to read aloud by candlelight, his voice wrapping around the prose like smoke, turning pain into poetry. But midway through a passage about hidden desires, his phone lit up again, this time with a name, Alex. He silenced it, but not before I saw the preview, "Miss You Tonight." Dinner tomorrow? My stomach plummeted, the warmth of the evening curdling into ice. "Who's Alex?" The words slipped out casual, but my tone betrayed me, edged with the raw scrape of doubt. Carter set the book down, green eyes meeting mine with that unflinching intensity. "Old friend from Portland." "Nothing." He reached for me, but I pulled back, the space between us yawning like a fault line. "Then why the miss you?" Silence stretched, heavy as the rain starting to patter against the window. Finally, he sighed, running a hand through his hair. "It's complicated. He was my ex. But we're done. Swear." The reassurance landed hollow, echoing my parents' old lines about phases and prayers. I wanted to believe him, to let the kiss that followed fierce, apologetic, erase the question mark. But trust, once chipped, bleeds slow. The next few days blurred into a tense tango. Mornings of stolen coffee and lingering touches, evenings laced with unspoken accusations. I catch him staring at his phone, thumb hovering over delete, and he'd flash that half-smile, pulling me into bed with murmurs of "You're all I want." And God, I believed it in those moments, bodies entwined, his breath hot against my neck, the world reduced to the slick slide of skin and the ache of release. But doubt is a thief, stealing sleep and seeding nightmares where I woke gasping, his side of the bed empty, the fridge photo mocking me from across the room. It culminated on a Friday night, the kind where Seattle pulls out all the stops, clear skies, stars punching through the urban veil like defiant freckles. We'd planned a hike up to Rattlesnake Ledge at dawn, but work dragged me late at the bookstore, a rush of last-minute holiday shoppers hunting the night circus like it was the Holy Grail. By the time I dragged myself to his door, bone-tired and bouquet of wildflowers wilting in my fist, the apartment was dark. No answer. Panic flickered, maybe a deadline, maybe an accident. But then I heard it. Muffled voices from the alley fire escape, his laugh, low and intimate, intertwined with another's. Heart in my throat, I circled the building, boots crunching gravel, and there he was, Carter, silhouetted against the moonlit bricks. Alex pressed close, taller, blonde, with that easy confidence of someone who never had to hide. Their kiss was a gut punch. Urgent, familiar, Carter's hands in Alex's hair like muscle memory. I froze, flowers dropping to the mud, the world tilting on its axis. Betrayal bloomed hot and vicious, tears blurring the scene as I backed away, silent as a ghost, fleeing into the night where streetlights blurred into halos of hurt. I didn't go home. Instead, I wandered the waterfront, the Ferris wheel's lights mocking me with their carefree spin, the sound lapping dark and indifferent. My phone stayed silent, no texts, no calls, until 2 a.m., when it buzzed. Where are you? Need to explain. I powered it off, curling up on a bench near the piers, the chill seeping into my bones as sobs racked me, raw and ugly. How had I let him in? How had one borrowed outlet led to this chasm? This confirmation that love was just another pretty lie for guys like me? Dawn broke gray and unforgiving, the ledge hike a cruel joke now. I dragged myself to the bookstore, shelves blurring through red-rimmed eyes, customers' chatter a distant drone. Carter showed up at lunch, disheveled and desperate, bursting through the door like a man possessed. Liam, please. The bell jingled mockingly as heads turned, but I grabbed his arm, hauling him to the back stacks where dusty tomes muffled our storm. You kissed him, I hissed, voice breaking. After everything, his face crumpled, green eyes shattered glass. It was a mistake. He's in town, cornered me, old habits, I don't know. But it's you, Liam. Only you. Lies were half-truths. The line blurred as he stepped closer, hands pleading. I love you. The words hung, a lifeline or a noose. I shoved him away, chest heaving. Get out, he did, door slamming like finality, leaving me amid the ghosts of printed words, wondering if any story ended without scars. But Seattle's rains always return, washing clean what they can and sometimes what they can't. The fallout hit like a Pacific nor'western gale, ripping through my life with winds that stripped leaves from the maples lining my street and illusions from my heart. Days bled into a numb routine, wake to the drip of the faucet in my leaky studio, slog through shifts at the bookstore where every queer romance on the shelf felt like a taunt, collapse into bed staring at the ceiling cracks that mapped my fractures. Friends, the sparse few I'd collected, like my coworker Mia with her purple-streaked hair and no bullshit advice, tried interventions over cheap IPAs at the Alibi Room. Block his ass, Liam. He's poison wrapped in pretty packaging. But I couldn't. Not yet. His texts piled up like unanswered prayers. I'm sorry. Let me make it right. Coffee? No expectations. Each one a hook in my resolve, tugging me toward the edge. 2 weeks in, the high tide of hurt receded just enough for anger to crest. I hurled his sketchbook, the one he'd left at my place, pages filled with my face in varying shades of longing, into the recycling bin, but fished it out hours later, fingers tracing the lines like braille for what we'd lost. That's when the dreams started, vivid, visceral replays of our nights, his body arching under mine, whispers of forever dissolving into Alex's shadow. I'd wake hard and hollow, cursing the want that lingered like smoke. Carter, meanwhile, unraveled in parallel. I heard through the grapevine Mia, who'd spotted him at a gallery opening in Fremont, nursing a whiskey neat and sketching furiously on napkins. Looked like hell, babe. Haunted. Part of me crowed in petty victory. The rest ached, a traitor to my fury. Seattle, with its layers of fog and fjords, mirrors its souls, veiled pains bubbling under stoic surfaces. And mine was erupting. The confrontation came unbidden. On a slate-gray Saturday as I trudged home from the market, arms laden with groceries that suddenly felt too heavy. There he was, on my stoop, soaked to the skin, no jacket, hair plastered like a drowned poet. Liam, my name cracked on his lips, raw as an open wound. I stopped, bags rustling, the rain a curtain between us. What the fuck are you doing here? Venom dripped, but my voice trembled. I had to see you. Please. He stood, water sheeting off him, green eyes storm-tossed. Against every screaming instinct, I unlocked the door, letting him in not forgiveness, but fatigue. We dripped trails across my threadbare rug, the air thick with unsaid elegies. He peeled off his shirt without preamble, shivering, and I tossed him a towel, averting my eyes from the familiar planes of his chest. The tattoo of a compass rose over his ribs, a nod to lost directions. Talk, I demanded, sinking onto the futon, arms crossed like armor. Poured out then, a deluge. Alex wasn't just an ex. He was the anchor that had nearly drowned Carter. They'd met in Portland's underground art scene, wild nights in lofts, mornings tangled in sheets stained with paint and regret. But Alex was fire, possessive, volatile, the kind who lit you up then burned you down. When the gigs vanished and Carter spiraled into depression, Alex bailed, only to circle back like a bad habit when he was in town for a conference. That night, he showed up drunk, talking about second chances. I was weak, stupid, but it meant nothing compared to us. Tears tracked his cheeks, mingling with rain. You woke something in me, Liam. Made me want to be better. Don't let one fuck up erase that. I listened, heart a battlefield, rage clashing with the echo of his touch, the way he'd held me after my first panic attack, whispering affirmations until the world steadied. You broke me? I whispered finally, voice fracturing. I trusted you. Let you in when I'd sworn off it. He knelt then, inches away, hands hovering like he feared I'd shatter. I know. And I'll spend every day proving I'm worth the pieces. The plea hung, vulnerable, and in that suspended breath, I saw him, not the betrayer, but the boy who'd run from Oregon shadows, sketching strangers to feel less alone. We didn't kiss. Not yet. But I let him stay, wrapped in my oversized hoodie, sharing takeout lo mein on the floor as the storm raged outside. Stories unfurled like fragile flags. His brother's rejection letter, yellowed and creased in his wallet. My screenplay's final scene, where the lovers reconcile under a harvest moon. Laughter crept in, tentative, then fuller, thawing the ice between us. By midnight, as thunder rolled distant over the Cascades, his head rested on my shoulder, breaths sinking in quiet truce. Rebuilding was no fairy tale montage. Trust rebuilt like a bridge after quake. Slow, shaky, with inspections at every turn. We started small, coffee sans outlets, walks where hands brushed but didn't clasp until earned. Therapy entered the chat. Mia recommended a queer counselor in the Hill, and Carter went first, emerging with haunted eyes but lighter shoulders. He says betrayal's a scar, not a sentence, he shared over vegan pho one night, chopsticks pausing midair. I nodded, my own sessions peeling back Ohio layers, the shame I'd carried like contraband. Intimacy returned in whispers, a hand on the small of my back during a midnight screening of Brokeback Mountain at the Varsity. Tears shared in the dark. Slow dances in his kitchen to Coulter Wall's gravelly twang. Bodies remembering without rush. Sex, when it reignited, was reverent, exploratory, laced with I love you, that felt forged in fire. But the high-wire act persisted. A cancelled dinner here, a vague text there, remnants of Alex's ghost. One night, post-argument over nothing, a forgotten call that twisted into everything. I stormed out, pounding pavement until lungs burned, only to find Carter waiting on my stoop again, this time with my favorite sketch. Us, on the fire escape, stars crowning our kiss. I'm all in, he vowed, voice steady as the Olympics on the horizon. No more half measures, and in that moment, under a canopy of clearing skies, I chose belief, leapt toward the man who'd borrowed my heart with a spilled coffee, praying our bridge would hold. Yet fate, that capricious bitch, had one more twist in her velvet glove. Winter clamped down on Seattle like a vice, blanketing the city in frost-kissed silence broken only by the occasional ferry horn moaning through the mist. Our fragile peace held through the solstice, holiday lights strung across Carter's fire escape, twinkling like hesitant stars as we baked gingerbread men with lopsided grins, his laughter warming the chill seeping through the panes. We hosted Mia and her girlfriend for New Year's, popping cheap champagne on the rooftop as fireworks bloomed over the Space Needle, his arm around my waist an anchor in the revelry. To accidents that stick, he toasted, lips brushing my ear, and I clinked glasses, heart swelling with a hope I'd thought drowned. But January brought the thaw and the flood. It started innocuous. A package at my door, unmarked but addressed to Carter, forwarded from Portland. Curiosity one. I sliced it open to find letters, dog-eared photos, a mixtape cassette labeled for the road ahead in looping script. Alex's handwriting. My pulse thundered as I rifled through. Love notes from their Portland days, promises of forever scrawled in margins. One dated just months before we met. Come back to me when you're ready. I'm waiting. The final blow, a ultrasound printout, grainy and dated 6 months prior, with a sticky note, our little secret. He deserves to know his dad. The world grayed at the edges. Carter, a father? The compass rose tattoo mocked me now, a direction he'd veered from, not toward. I confronted him that evening, letters splayed on his kitchen table like evidence in a trial. He walked in whistling, takeout bags swinging, but froze at the tableau, color draining from his face. Liam. Where did your mail? I cut in, voice steel over shattering glass. Alex's? Or should I say, your kids? The word hung, venomous, as he sank into a chair, head in hands. It's not what you think, but it was worse in its omissions. Alex had gotten pregnant. No. Wait, that didn't track. Carter's voice broke the riddle. Surrogate. We talked about it once, drunk on dreams. Then he bailed. But she went through with it. A boy. Theo, named after Carter's grandfather, the one who'd taught him to draw. He'd known for months, hidden it like a tumor, terrified it'd scare me off. I wasn't ready. We weren't. But he's mine, Liam. And I want to be there. For him. For us. The pronoun cracked me open, spilling fury and grief in equal measure. You lied. Again. Built this fairy tale on secrets. He reached for me, pleading, but I recoiled, the chasm widening to abyss. I was scared you'd leave. Like everyone else. Tears streamed, his broad shoulders heaving. But this? Hiding a child? That's not fear, Carter. That's cowardice. The fight escalated, words as weapons, hurling accusations like selfish and untrustworthy, until I grabbed my coat, storming into the sleet-lashed night, his sobs chasing me down the stairs. I vanished into the city's underbelly, crashing at Mia's, pounding out screenplay pages fueled by rage and red wine, auditioning for indie shorts where my raw hurt translated to screen gold. Offers trickled in, a lead in a queer coming-of-age flick shooting in Olympia, but each felt hollow without him to share the thrill. Carter's messages evolved from desperate to desolate. Theo's first laugh. Wish you were here. Attached. A photo of a chubby-cheeked infant, green eyes mirroring his dad's, gummy smile piercing my armor. Weeks stretched to a month, the production wrapping as cherry blossoms dusted the U-District paths. I returned to my studio, finding it aired out, a single sketch on the table, me, holding a child who looked like Theo, our faces lit by dawn. No note, just his signature CV, a question in ink. My resolve crumbled. I texted the park. Noon. Discovery Park, where we'd picnicked in summer's bloom, now a verdant hush under spring's tentative sun. He arrived with the baby in a carrier, tiny fists waving like flags of truce. Theo cooed, oblivious, as Carter's eyes searched mine, wary, hopeful. He's beautiful, I admitted, voice thick, kneeling to let the kid grasp my finger. Soft, trusting, like love should be. We walked the trails, words weaving tentative threads, his custody battles, therapy breakthroughs, the Saget's grace in handing over photos and milestones. I fucked up, he confessed, voice raw. But losing you, that's the real scar. If you'll have me, us, I'll build it right. No secrets. I waited, the betrayals, the births, the boy between us gurgling at birdsong. Human, messy, profoundly real. It's not easy, I said finally, stopping at the bluff overlooking the sound, waves whispering absolution. But nothing worth it is. His hand found mine, tentative, then firm, and I squeezed back, the compass aligning. We kissed there, salt-tanged and slow, Theo between us like a bridge, the city sprawling forgiving below. Months later, as summer hummed back, we moved into a 2-bedroom in Fremont, space for scripts, sketches, and midnight feedings. My screenplay sold, a indie darling at Sundance. Its dedication simple, for the accidents that become home. Carter's designs graced album covers nationwide, his smiles deeper, unguarded. Theo's first steps, taken toward me, arms outstretched. Carter's laugh, our soundtrack. Life's no neat arc, no Hollywood fade to credits. Conflicts simmer. Co-parenting calls with Alex, the specter of old wounds flaring on rainy nights. But we navigate, hands clasped, choosing each other daily. In America's vast tapestry, from Ohio fields to Seattle spires, love isn't borrowed. It's claimed, outlet by outlet, Mistake by mended mistake. And in the quiet hours, with Theo's breaths sinking ours, I know we're the story worth telling, raw edges and all.